welcome back to the Power of a Hobby. I'm your host, Dom Fenton, and we have another guest. Hi, Sheena, how are you?
Hi, Dom. I'm fine. Thank you very much. The sun is shining here in deepest, darkest Lincolnshire, so all is good.
What a way to start the day. Even though it's not the start of the day, but it's a great way to start. Sheena, we've been trying to get this going for so long, this one. Obviously, we know each other reasonably well. I'd like to think we know each other well. Obviously, for those who are listening or tuning in, why don't you just sort of introduce yourself and tell them what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm Sheena Whyatt, and I help business owners build the businesses that they want around the challenges that they face through monthly coaching sessions that hold them accountable, keep them motivated, and help them create ideas and ways to make their business work for them with coaching sessions that work if they let it. And I do that from home. I'm here from my home office, as I say, in deepest, darkest Lincolnshire, which also means that the internet has to work really hard to get here, as you know from conversations we've had in the past. And that provides the challenges of its own. So when I'm not in the office, I'm out and about in the house, and I'm being ably assisted just down there by my office assistant, Boris the cat. So here's hoping he stays asleep for the rest of the day.
Within this one today, I've actually got Luna the dog. So hopefully Luna's going to be nice and quiet, sat on the sofa at the moment. As I said, it's great to have you here. And for those who don't know, the reason that we do know each other, you are my business coach.
It's
So,
all my fault.
but it's so sorry. But obviously, it's a great chance to have you on. We've discussed this sort of topic quite a lot anyway. So it's really good to have you actually on as a guest as well. So, Sheena, the question that I ask everyone when they first come on to here, what does the power of a hobby mean to you?
It's everything, actually, because there are two things for me that I think my hobby, I have more than one, but the main hobby particularly allows me to do. And that is, first of all, to be able to indulge my creative side. I'm a dyed in the wool creative, and I'm always on the go looking to make things, do things, and things like that. But equally, it gives me the headspace that I need to just sort out all the different weird shit that's going on in here. Some of it is on post-it notes just there, and it's just rearranging my brain. And that was what the power of a hobby gives to me. It gives me that calm space. It gives me that me time. The I know the modern phrase, if you like, is that whole self-care thing, but it equally it allows me to change gear, just slow down a bit, reevaluate what's going in my life. And equally, I can do that with the hobby that I enjoy. I can do that pretty much anywhere I am as well. And that makes it really valuable to me.
And I think that's a great thing because actually, the amount of guests we have on here, there are certain hobbies that they can only do in certain places. The fact that actually you can do this anywhere, the fact that actually, as a coach, you also take on a lot of stuff from other people actually plays an even bigger part. And I think that's
Yes.
really quite vital, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is because I think a lot of people who either have never had a coach or don't get involved with coaches, they kind of think that it starts and finishes with the session that you do with somebody, but it never does. You're always your brain is always working around, oh, this is person that I coach could be helped by this, or this could be useful for them in this way, or oh, I've had an idea that I need to share with Dom next time. That kind of thing. Your brain is always racing around that. And that actually can be quite exhausting sometimes.
We do have that conversation quite a lot, especially when we come off our call, because actually I could be anywhere around the country.
Yes. I nearly always go on then. Tell me where you are today.
And
Which
today I'm
Starbucks,
quite
which
close to
glamorous
home.
car park,
Well,
which
yeah.
motorway.
And the thing is, people may laugh listening to this now, but actually that's where we've had some of our calls. We've had our calls
Yeah,
in Starbucks. We've had our
yeah,
calls while I've been on the M6.
absolutely.
We've had our calls in hotels all over the UK.
Yeah,
So actually, they are legitimate because that's where we have done these sort of calls.
yeah,
And I'm sure I'm not
exactly
the
right.
only. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
No,
Well,
no.
no, wouldn't have thought so. So, Sheena, why don't you let everyone into what your hobby is?
It is cross stitching. It is canted cross stitch, which I was introduced to by my mum when I was 18 years old for quite a specific reason. My mum had always done cross stitch for pretty much as long as I could remember, but most vividly when we were living in America. So my late father was a pilot in the Royal Air Force and got an exchange tour to go and work with the United States Air Force. And so we lived over there for 2 or 3 years. And my mum took up the hobby as I remember it then. And it's not sexy when you're a teenager, counted cross stitch, frankly. So, I wasn't really all that interested. Even at that stage in my head, it's like, this is an old lady's, hobby. So I didn't really think about it at all. And I say until I was 18. And when I was 18, I had joined the Royal Air Force to become an air traffic controller. I'd gone off to initial officer training in the October of 1989. I am indeed that old. And I had a fairly catastrophic injury, actually, which ended my Air Force career before it even got started and resulted in me having to have pretty much permanent bed rest for about 3 months to start the healing process for some significant damage to my lower back. And when you're 18 and the only thing that you can do is, lie on the floor or in your bed looking at the ceiling, boredom very quickly set in. And dear listener, this was well before the days of tablets and mobile phones.
Right. That's the thing, isn't it? And I think people take things for granted in terms of what they've got now. So obviously bedridden for 3 months. Just go as much go back to that point and go, actually, what do you think the impact of doing the cross stitch had for you? Even at that point as an 18-year-old.
Think if I'm being brutally honest, it's not me going around the bend, because although my bed rest, if you like, was not, I was trying to think of how to describe it. I was somewhat mobile, but couldn't do anything. I could get myself up and go and make a cup of tea, for example, but I couldn't really go any further than that. And it was one of those injuries where there wasn't really much that could do apart from letting the body heal before you could start to recuperate. So I was going around the bend with boredom. In those days, breakfast television didn't exist really. This was the days of telly starting at about lunchtime with something like Pebble Mill, which is not really what you're watching at 18 either. And there was a lot going on in my head, Dom. This career that I'd wanted had disappeared and I didn't really know what I was going to do next. My dad was at that stage working from home, having retired from the Air Force and equally finding his own way. So we were kind of thrashing about between us. And I just needed something to do. I needed something to do that was not exertive, that was calming and relaxing and all the stuff that when you're 18 sounds really naff. I wanted to be going out with my friends. I wanted to be going to the pub. I wanted to be, all that. And I couldn't do it. And so at one point, my mum got brave, bless her, which is, the story of her parenting of me, and just said, why don't you give cross stitching a try? And after I'd kind of curled my lip at her in the whole what kind of thing, she just said, just try it. You might enjoy it. Just give it a go. And that was all it took. I remember vividly the first thing that I stitched was god awful. I mean, the mess I made of it was horrendous because I was impatient and, hadn't listened to what my mum had said. Duh, I'm 18.
Yeah.
Of course I'm not listening. I know everything.
Yep.
So I hadn't listened to what she'd said, which meant it looked a mess. But I kind of got the bug then at that point and was looking at it and thinking, I know I could do this better. And actually, what I enjoyed about it was the meditative effect, the clues in the name. It's counted cross stitch. So you have to pay attention to the pattern and you have to follow where you're going and you have to make sure that you are, keeping on top of where the pattern is going and all that sort of thing. And once I stopped getting frustrated about how slow it was, because when you start, you are kind of tongue stuck out your mouth and kind of 1, 2, that kind of stuff. But once I got a bit of confidence, then I really did get the bug for it. And then it just exploded into something that, golly, 35 years on-ish, my maths isn't great, I still do it now.
And I think this is the whole thing about when we talk about hobbies. There are certain reasons why we fall into them. But actually, I do personally, but my belief in any of this is actually they become part of who we are. And
Yeah.
sometimes hobbies come into our. I personally believe that things happen for reasons in certain formats. And actually, there's a reason that your mum gave you that cross stitch. And as much as it can sound however people think, I can't imagine you as an 18-year-old going, well, actually, this is something now that I'm going to be doing, that I'm now going to be on a podcast so many
Yeah.
years later, talking, going, actually, I'm still doing it.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is that there were two sort of key things that happened that have meant I've kept going with it. I got better at it, like you do,
Yeah.
with hobby. And I think as you get better and your confidence grows, you get a bit more ambitious with the sort of things that you want to do. So, the first couple of cross stitch pieces that I did were tiny, small, fairly quick to do, big, as in big holes in the fabrics, etc. And then as I got more confident, I did more complex things. Equally, the good thing that came out of not completing initial officer training in 1989 was I met my husband. He was on the same initial officer intake as I was. And we got married in 1993. And then I got swept into the world of being a plus one, an Air Force wife, and living in military accommodation, which very quickly I want to bust a myth. It's not free. We do pay for it. And yes, it is shit. And so it's also bland as a bland thing from Blandsville. Everything is covered in magnolia. If there's carpet on the floor, it's absolutely crappy, horrible, all that kind of stuff. And then I realized that I'd got a skill that meant that I could create things for my home that were portable because, of course, you move. And so there was no point getting all creative with pots of paint, etc. That came later, much to Ollie's dismay. But, was thinking, I just want a way of being able to personalize this magnolia box that I've been put in for 2 to 3 to 4 years, depending on where we were with Ollie's job as a helicopter pilot to begin with. And so I started to do that. I started to cross stitch bigger pieces for my home. And equally, as that started to happen, what I realized I was doing was I was future planning and I was creating things for the home we wanted when we came out of military accommodation. And so that was quite exciting and thinking, what kind of things do I want? Realizing I was really drawn to American shaker style type patterns. That didn't surprise me, although it took a little while to come out thinking, why do I keep picking this stuff? Because that's, of course, what I'd seen Mum do back in the States. And that's what I'd seen around in the States. And so, that started to develop there. And I started to do bigger pieces. I started to do bigger pieces for gifts for friends who were either getting married at the beginning of our own marriage or then producing ankle biters later on and doing samplers and things for them. And they take a long time, to do a marriage sampler. Just the one that springs to mind was for my brother-in-law, who got married a couple of years after Ollie and I did, a few years after us. It took me a year to cross stitch that with all the detail on it, etc. And so there's a huge amount of emotional commitment that goes into these created items, as well as the stuff where I'm thinking, at some point this will hang in my home. And before Ollie and I even got married, I stitched a little piece which was about 8 inches by 8 inches that just says home sweet home. And it had the year 1992. It's the year before we got married. And I remember saying to Ollie, I am never going to put that on the wall with a nail until we find Whyatt Towers, which is where I'm talking to you from, which we did in 2013. And it was the first picture that went up on the wall with a nail.
This is what I love about different things. There is so much emotion linked to things. There are so many memories linked to things. And as I said, they do become who we are and they become a major part of us. Talk to me about the first thing you did, the first one back in the day. If you can remember what it was. Generally, we sort of have a fair old memory about what these things are.
Yeah.
talk to me about that. And yeah, just give me an example of some of the stuff you've now done. And as I say, to take a year must have been a massive thing. But
Yeah, it
you know, and
is.
that's a big part of your life.
Yeah, it is. And it's doing it a little piece, I'm full disclosure, I don't sit down and cross stitch every day, but it was, doing bits and bobs in the evening. So the first thing that I did was a little, I'm trying to think how to describe, a little monogram for Ollie, who, of course, was my newly met boyfriend at that time. And I made such a hash of it. It was absolutely untrue. Who knew you could make such an utter screw up of three letters, O, B, and W? Oh my God. The O was wonky. The B, I've got one half of the B was bigger than the other half of the B, but not the right way round. So it looks like one of it sort of, inflated. And it's not quite square. And I hadn't got it quite. And it's awful. And I was desperate to unpick it, and mum wouldn't let me. She just said, no, you need to learn from it. And I put knots in the thread. That's a crime in cross stitch. So it was all bubbly underneath. I'd also marked on the fabric with pencil where my place was, so I didn't lose it, which didn't realize that that doesn't wash off. So it is a thing, Dom. It is not a thing of beauty, but it is a thing. And it is upstairs, tucked away somewhere that nobody sees it.
But you've still got it. You've still got
Yeah,
it.
I've still got it. It's a lesson learner, you see. And as we work together, one of the things about coaching is learning from lessons.
Mm.
And if I'd unpicked it and gone again, then I would never have had that reference of just hold your horses, Sheena. Don't try and run before you can walk, which nicely morphs into what's behind my head now, which is don't make me walk when I want to fly. And and it's that, and just thinking, just follow the process, trust the process, and all will be well. So yes, the first piece, utter mess. I'm desperately embarrassed about it, but it's still upstairs. It's 30 plus years old, and it's still got pencil marks on it to this day.
So give me an example of two or three other things that you've done.
So I talked to you about the little home sweet home thing, which was a really key point and key thing that I did. The other key piece that I made was a really complicated shaker style image. The shaker motto, if you like, is, excuse me, hands to God, hearts to God, hands to mine, hearts to God. And this was a really complex pattern. And I'd been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off because I just thought, this is going to be a long project and it's going to require a huge amount of concentration. And it just scared me a little bit. And it's the piece that I did when I was going through chemotherapy, because at that point, finding the energy to do very much of anything was practically impossible.
Yeah.
And for the first 2 or 3 days after each chemotherapy treatment, for me, everybody who has the misfortune to go through it experiences it differently. But I had zero energy, and just felt like the whole world was on the other side of a piece of cling film. Everything was fuzzy, and it was just hard to drum up any enthusiasm for anything funny, that really, considering how you've just poisoned your body in order to try and make yourself better.
Yeah.
It's funny that your body kind of goes, this is a bit shit, could we just
Yeah.
stop? So it kind of went full circle, really, Dom, in that there I was, not very well, not being able to do anything very much, bored, needing something to take my mind off what was going on. So I did that piece, and by God, it was a bugger. But I did it and I completed it. And it's actually the last big piece I ever did, because it was kind of a line in the sand moment when I finished it and I finished chemo. I had it framed and it's on the wall here at Whyatt Towers. I go past, I see it every day. It's in the living room. And I just look at it and think, yeah, okay, that was a bit of a seminal moment. My cancer treatment finished 13 years ago. And I have done little things since then, but no big things. And I think it's probably just because the moment is not right. That was
Mm.
yeah, okay, thanks for that, world. Thanks for that, life. Thanks for that celebration of getting through it. I have an entire chest of drawers of patterns I will probably never live long enough to sew. But it's okay, because at some point that bug will come back, if you like, and go, it's all right, you can pick up a bigger piece. You can pick up one of these big sampler pieces again. At the moment, I do little things and I do little bits and I give them away. And I think that's quite interesting. That moment of going, I'm done. I'm finished with chemotherapy. I am finished with all the surgeries. Now it's the beginning of the remission journey. Was the time just to put the needle down for a little while and just celebrate that phase of my life ending. And what I did was picked up a different sort of needle and got into crocheting instead. And so it's just interesting that that process came round that full circle. And I think they are probably the three most seminal pieces in the house. The first one I'm not proud of at all. The second one that had such a future looking meaning, even at that very early stage of only just having really met Ollie and all that kind of stuff. And we weren't even engaged when I stitched the Home Sweet Home. And then the cancer piece, although I don't think about it that way, the big, complicated, scary piece that I did at a time when, there was a lot going on.
Yeah. To be honest, some of this we'd chatted about beforehand or previously and other stuff. It's times like this where I get very humbled in terms of who I meet and things like that, just because of what people go through. And I talked to someone last week regarding the other stuff I do and the other podcasts I do, and just say, actually, I love what I do because I get to see people in their true form, in their true element. And actually, something like a hobby, something like this podcast, I really can't see a moment where people have come on here and not been real and not been how they should have been. And for me, that's the power of a hobby, is actually you can, for me, obviously it was my sport and the other stuff. And for me, I'm still trying to find a hobby again, so I'm going on that journey at the moment. If you imagine now over the last, and you sort of touched on it there, if you imagine over the last 30 plus years that you've been doing this, what real impact has it had on you? Where do you think, because I know where I would have been without my rugby or without my sport or without doing this, where do you think you would have been?
I think I would probably have taken a very different turn right back at the beginning. I think bless her, if my mum hadn't been a mum and thought, I need to step in here and stop Sheena going into this spiral of my world is over. The career I wanted, I can't have. I can't live the life I want to right now. I was, and I was 18. Let's remember that. I think she thought, the doors of doom are closing. I need to just kind of wheedle my way in, because it gave me the confidence, I think, to look outside of what seemed like a very small world at that point. The career I wanted had gone. My mum and dad were living, my mum still does, bless her, in a little village in Lincolnshire. Lincolnshire is a lovely place to live, but it's not a particularly exciting place to live when you're 18.
Yeah.
And she just gave me the confidence to take stock. And that equally gave me the confidence to start to think about what I did want to do. And certainly at that point, at 18, did I sit there and think, well, I can't be an air traffic controller in the Royal Air Force. I know, I'll be a business coach. No, no, not at all. But what it did allow me to do was to think about the kind of career I could build that would allow me to be with Ollie, which then became working for myself. And so, I think without that hobby and that grounding time, just to sit and think, okay, what happens next then? And something that required me to stop, think, pay attention, concentrate, and not be constantly, doing that all over the place, I think was really quite key to where I am now, and to exercise that creative part of me in a positive way, rather than taking that energy, which sometimes can drag you down, that can very quickly lead into darker thoughts and less positive mindset, and being able to create something and being able to go, do you know what, I did that, I made that. The achievement was a massive confidence booster. So for all the parents out there who go to parent school, keep going, because you're doing a bloody good job.
Yeah. And it's not easy. and we do the best we can, and we do choices for certain reasons. We think we're doing the right thing. You know, if it doesn't work, that just keep on going, and I think that's the beauty of it. We've already been talking for over 25 minutes, and this is what I love about this is that actually time flies because actually the guests that come on talk about things that they're passionate about and mean something to them. The amount of comments I have from guests who come on and just go, I can't believe I've just sat here talking for over 20 minutes, 25 minutes about something I love to do. Because we don't get that opportunity to do that. We don't get to do that a lot. Sheena, last question I ask everyone. If someone came up to you and they were looking for a hobby but didn't have one, but really wanted one, what would you say to them?
I would tell them to go and find their nearest craft shop and go and see what appeals. If they're, if they're looking for a hobby and they're looking for something to do, go and find a craft shop. Just go in there, go and have a look. You'll be amazed at the different kinds of things you can do. My challenge now is trying to stop starting lots and lots of different crafting things, like, oh, I could do that, and thinking along those lines. If you really want a hobby, then actually, in all seriousness, there's a little bit of coaching head here. Think about what excites you. Think about what gives you joy. Think about what you're passionate about. A hobby doesn't have to be making things like I do. It can be being part of something like a choir or a community group. It could be indulging your love of food, which I do as well. And it could be just getting involved in a garden, which is my other happy place. If you haven't got a hobby and you're really looking for one, then also talk to people about what they do and why they enjoy it. Listen to more of Dom's podcasts and just get an idea of what's out there, because I guarantee you, you might initially start off by thinking, well, that sounds a bit naff. But if it's the right hobby for you, it will get into your head at some point and then you won't be able to put it down.
Love that. What a way to end. And even a coaching tip, even a business coaching tip. Because it all translates. It all
It
it
does.
all translates. Sheena, thank you so much for your time. I can't believe how quickly that's gone. And I'm so pleased we finally got you. We got this done.
Finally got there.
I know. Woohoo! Amazing. Thank you, everyone else, for tuning in, listening, or seeing the video on YouTube. This is the Power of a Hobby. I'm your host, Dom Fenton, and I'll see you again next time. Take care now. Bye bye.